You mean to tell me that your operations, your critical functions are not documented anywhere? How do you get people to understand what their use case is for AI? How do they know when they need to even use AI?
Strategy is standard. But leading people, that's where the magic happens. In every organization, there comes a moment, a shift, a stretch, a choice. How do you help your people thrive? Give them the voice, the tools, and the leadership they deserve.
I'm Rhonda.
And I'm Kevin.
Welcome to the Wolfpack Rise and Howl podcast, where we talk about what it takes to lead, coach, and transform from the inside out.
Hey, good morning, Kevin. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Rhonda. I am doing fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm good, thanks. So let's just dig right in because I wanted to share something with you. I had a couple of conversations recently which prompted what I wanted to talk about today. So first of all, I had in my first conversation yesterday, I was speaking with a colleague and we were talking about the ETAC program, the AI adoption program that's under development right now. And he's particularly interested in it. But he asked me a question which made me realize that I need to be very specific about the audience for that program. His question was, how do you get people to understand what their use case is for AI? How do they know when they need to even use AI? And I said, wow, that's a really good question because you're reminding me that I need to be very explicit when I'm talking about this program, that the prerequisite is that this program is for companies that have already determined that they are going to use AI and that they've established what the business cases are for using AI and they know how they want to use it. Naturally, then that made me think, well, how will they know that? And then let me follow up with another conversation that I had just this morning with a completely different person. And this person was sharing with me a recent, rather disappointing call that they had with a potential client who approached. This is a client who need some training developed. And they just came right out of the gate real hot, talking about what they want, what they need, demanding that this guy show them, well, show us your samples, show us everything, show us your and what AI are you using? I mean, they just started completely putting the cart before the horse, And he was explaining to me that they just had it all made up in their mind that they just wanted to use AI. Mm-hmm. Because, not for any given reason, other than they just wanted it. Because it's a new flashy, shiny thing, right? Everybody's doing it. So, hey, we want some of that. And so that just validated my thoughts even more that I had already started forming since yesterday when I knew I wanted to talk about this on the podcast today. Because I thought, you've either got one end of the spectrum where companies are just resistant to AI. They don't want to use it at all. They don't have anything to do with it. And then you have some that are just like, yeehaw, let's just do it. They're just going at it out of left field, no thought, no thought process put towards it. So, and I got really upset actually with this man telling me how that meeting went. And I thought, because, it reeks of all the things that we've already talked about. Training isn't always the answer. Why do I know you think you know what you need, but, we don't start there. We don't start with talking about what we're going to develop before we get down to what the need is. Right. Anyway,
Mhm.
that's a
Sure.
completely separate topic. But anyhow, based on the conversation yesterday, I started to think to myself, how do you establish what a legitimate need is to use AI without just going at it from the mindset that, hey, I just want to use it? Because that's just the wrong way to go about doing it. Sorry, it just is. I, of
Mhm.
course, believe that it's a very valuable, powerful tool when used correctly. You know my stance on this. I view it as a way to enhance the resources and the people that you've already got, not as a means to just automatically think in terms of replacing them. And we talked about that a lot yesterday as well when I was talking to the guy yesterday. But anyhow, so that's the big question of the day. How do you identify instances within your organization where AI could be very useful for
Mhm.
you to
Mhm.
either save time, increase productivity, a whole bunch of other things. So that's what I want to talk about today. And
Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
I have some notes,
Mhm.
and but before I jump in, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I was trying to contain I wanted to laugh to some degree when you described the conversation you were having with your colleague and what they shared with regards to the meeting that they had with their client or prospect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's so typical, as you and I have often talked about in the past, Rhonda, that um, organizations have this, or a lot of organizations, not all, but I'll say a lot, because you and I have both experienced this over the years, have a propensity to want to dive in head first. And it's typically because they're all jazzed up with regards to the latest, shiniest toy to endeavor in.
Mm.
Um, and so, what your colleagues shared with you is something that we've seen multiple times over the years. But I'm going to tell you something. Generative AI is not the shiny toy to just jump in head first without knowing what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just massive. It's just so huge. It has so many tentacles coming out of it. And so organizations really need to take a measured approach with regards to how they're going to jump in, where they're going to jump in, how they're going to jump in, um, and do it right from the very start. So
and
that's
and
my
and why they're going to jump in.
oh, that's probably the most important thing. Let's start there, Rhonda.
Not
Okay,
just
why?
like, woohoo, let's jump in just because, we're
Yeah,
jumping
right.
in because we want to. We don't know why, but we're just doing it, like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeehaw, let's go, So, yeah,
yeah.
you're very right. And, we've talked about that already. I know this is about the third episode now that we've really kind of focused on AI. Um, I mean, it's a very timely topic for sure. And
Mhm,
so,
mhm,
I realized, and I was so glad that it came up yesterday in that conversation because I was just kind of in my excitement and my focus on working on developing that program, that training program.
mhm,
I just I overlooked the not that I overlooked it because of course I guess I made a mental assumption in my own mind that surely I'm going to be working with companies that have already established what the business case is for their use of AI. But then I thought,
mhm,
aha, what about
mhm,
those who haven't, or those who have, but they didn't take the right approach to identify the use cases? They weren't
mhm,
methodical about it, they didn't apply a certain strategy. So that's where I set out, and I even told him, I said, now you've got me thinking I probably need to put a separate program together, specifically only just dealing with how to go about identifying legitimate use cases for AI. because
Yeah.
that's got to be the prerequisite. So let's dive in, shall we?
Yes, let's do it.
So the first thing that I want to say is that you want to ask yourself, and I'm speaking, you're the leader in the organization, whatever, what are the pressure points within your department, within your division, whatever. You want to focus on what the pressure points are. And, so, and I've just got some little notes here, but, so, um, don't start with this, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we used AI? Like shiny object, like just stop, right? But rather you want to start asking questions like where are we stuck? Um, where are where are the points where employees are feeling exhausted or overworked or approaching burnout due often to repetitive tasks and things of that nature, or
Hmm.
due to frustration. And I think we might have touched on this previously too. Really super high performing, qualified people who
Hmm.
are, no, we didn't touch on it. I read about this. There's a lady that I follow on LinkedIn, and she specializes in burnout. And I do specifically now remember she wrote an article about burnout isn't always just, oh, I'm overworked. Burnout also looks like, hey, I'm a really highly qualified person, but I'm not able to use my skills to their best potential. And that's really frustrating and that's demotivating. Okay. So
Hmm.
that's, I remember now. So these are the kinds of things that we need to be on the lookout for when we talk about where are the pressure points within the organization that could potentially be an area where AI could be utilized to relieve some of that.
Hmm.
So it's all about how you frame the question. So um, if if I would say a really, to quote you, low hanging fruit would be anything that's repetitive,
Yeah.
you know, that can
Yeah.
be replicated, that can be just quickly eliminated off the plate. And I know we've talked about that as well in
Yeah.
the past episodes about applying that ETAC framework, right? So basically, things like emails and just perfunctory documents and things of that nature. Let's just start with the real easy stuff and then
Yeah.
just layer,
Yeah.
it's going to be layered, a layered approach. But
Yeah.
anything that's repetitive that doesn't require a whole lot of brain power or is not a critical safety risk, for example, where you really
Hmm.
do need a human in the loop kind of thing. So
Right.
let's start with that step one.
Yeah.
I would ask that we pose the questions like that. So you see how that's different from, hey,
Hmm.
can we use AI in any and every possible situation because it's so cool?
Hmm.
No, don't take that approach. We're not like a kid in a candy store, right?
Yeah.
So that's step one. The next thing is to identify the type of work that's done. Now I'm getting into the neighborhood of talking about doing a job task analysis. I have not seen that done consistently,
Hmm.
if at all, in most places where I've worked. I don't know why that is. I just don't know because, going back to some of our earlier episodes where we were talking about performance consulting and measuring job quality and things of that nature, how in the world do you measure whether someone's doing something the right way if you don't have clearly defined job task inventories? And
Right.
so, as part of this method of identifying use cases for AI, you have to understand the work that's at hand
Hmm.
because everything is juxtaposed against the kind of work that we do on a daily basis and where there are opportunities to be more efficient and maybe save some time and increase productivity. So, on that note, as part of the job task inventory, I also want to clarify that it's also not simply about, hey, I do these tasks, I do this. But in addition to wanting to do the best that you can to kind of determine how much time is spent on each task, like you're going to ask a person on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, what do you do? How much time do you spend on it? And assign criticalities to it, like I was talking about just a few moments ago.
Mhm.
How critical is that task? Is it kind of like a nice to have, or is it like absolutely, mandatory? This has to get done. To what degree of mastery do you have to complete that task? Like, do you have to have 100% accuracy each and every single time that you perform this task, or is it kind of like it's okay if it's not 100%, right? And that's
Mhm.
where you get into the realm of like critical safety environments. There are certain things that just have to be 100% right all the time,
Sure.
like flying planes and things of that nature,
Yeah, stuff
Um,
like that. Right.
and so the other thing too is now breaking down the tasks, what type of work is involved? Is it, you know, is it repetitive? Um, are there patterns? How much of a cognitive load is required to complete that?
Mhm.
So factoring those things into the conversation as well. So it's the quality of the task, the
Mhm.
the importance of the task, the criticality, the complexity of it, the
Mhm.
quality, the type of nature. Is it something you do manually? Is it something that requires a lot of thinking, a lot of cognitive? Does it require other people to be involved to help make decisions? Things of that nature.
Right.
So yeah, so that's just like I was just getting started there because my first thought was going to, well, we need to start with these job task analysis to really map out what is it that everybody's doing.
Yeah. Right.
Because if
Right.
you don't do that, then you're going to end up making a lot of assumptions.
Yeah.
And then when we get into the discussion about how to get people to adopt AI, the last thing you want to do is make assumptions about the work that they do. You need to have an understanding of what they're doing and why they do it. And if you are someone who's actually doing the work, the likelihood of you having a more intimate understanding of the particular details of it are going to be higher than your manager or their boss or up. The higher up you go, the less likely it is that people above you are going to have such a familiarity with the
Sure.
specificity of what you do. So don't
Right.
come in here as some kind of a department head making assumptions about what people do and then
Yeah.
jumping into, oh, well, AI can do that. That
Yeah.
okay, you want to kill trust? That's a great way to go about doing that, because
Sure.
as the goal is to get people comfortable to adopt AI, building trust is like a really we've got to start with that. So that's why it's really important to take a methodical approach to doing this.
Mhm. Yeah. I
Yeah.
agree wholeheartedly. Um, everything that you've mentioned thus far, Rhonda, resonates. I mean, you hit it on a nailhead based on everything that I've researched and have read with regards to the approach to adopting AI in the workplace. Um, I've looked in a couple different places, and they were all on the same page with regards to taking a structured workflow first approach. Um, and what was meant by that is making sure that you understand, if you will, all of the um, workflow task, if you will, and breaking them down to really understand that first and foremost. And by the way, before AI even came along or whatever, that was a critical, and I'm going to say miss in most places I've worked at, because there were times when we didn't quite understand why or how something was working, and then someone came up with a novel idea. Hey, why don't we do a desk level audit? of that particular function or that process. And on the very few times that I've ever participated in um, conducting an audit, with the supervisor and the worker bee performing that task, it just always went sideways because there wasn't a clear understanding from the beginning, even with the person that was performing those particular tasks. So that is very, very critical. And especially now when we're talking about artificially allowing a robot or a system, if you will, to perform it. You got to make sure you understand what the human is doing in that particular process or procedure before you can look for AI to perform it. So spot on with making sure that you understand all of the tasks that are involved. And the other thing that I read was very consistent with what you shared too is identifying the level of importance, what can be relegated, if you will, to the machine to perform. That's very repetitive. And by the way, I don't want to make some of those things sound like they're unimportant because they're very important. You go a day without checking your email.
Mhm.
You know what? You're going to probably get in trouble. So that's a very important task or whatever. But
Mhm.
it's one that we know is repetitive. There are things, certain emails that come in to one's email box day in and day out that may not necessarily need to be seen or read at the time that it comes in or whatever. So yeah, that would probably be something that's low risk that you could feel comfortable with allowing AI to take over for you. And by the way, I'm hearing that, or I've seen in a couple of places where that's being done very successfully. A number of routine tasks where AI is taking over and freeing up individuals to spend time on more important matters. So,
Yeah, and that's
so
I want to I want to I want to elaborate on that too though. Because you just reminded me of another example of where there's been a lot of pain. A lot of people are out of work right now, and the hiring process has become an absolute freaking freak show out there, a horror show. And I'm really pissed off about the number of times I keep reading about how lazy the hiring and the recruiting process has become because they're just relying on AI blindly, or at least it appears that way. Excuse me. So, this is an example of where I think one of the most important questions that you need to ask yourself when you're assessing an AI use case is, does the task or the job require human judgment or empathy? Some
yeah.
things you just shouldn't leave to AI, period, all by itself. And we already know that there have been errors and mistakes that AI has made. Excuse me. Well, didn't it happen at the beginning of 2025 when all this Doge crap was going on? And there was a situation where AI was used to make determinations about who should be fired and whatnot, and it was just left rogue all off onto its own, and a lot of mistakes were made. Okay, and there was very little empathy employed in that process, as we know. So that's really, really super important.
Mhm.
So scaling it back to an individual's job or a team's project objective or a department's mission or a company's vision or whatever, okay? At whatever level we're talking about, you always need to have the question in mind of, does this require human judgment and empathy? And bake that into everything that you do, okay?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um Another question is consistency more important than creativity?
Mm.
And what do I mean by that? So, and again, it's going to depend on the actual task. I think that if creativity is more important, then that might be something that you need to leave to the humans. That's just my
Mhm.
opinion. Okay. If it's something that needs consistency and there's not a lot of risk and it doesn't require a lot of empathy or then yeah, that might be ripe for uh, uh, assigning that to AI. Of course, I always say with human oversight. No matter anything that I say here today, I'm an advocate of anything that you do having human oversight. But
Absolutely.
that's just
You know,
me.
yeah, Rhonda, that's my. I feel the same way, and I'm thinking with regards to using this very powerful tool that we have right now. I see it as a marriage, a happy medium, if you will, between the human who brings the judgment, the empathy that you reference to the table, um, but allows the machine to do all of the perfunctory, repetitive work that that's to be done. And by the way, the machine can do it a lot more efficiently, more effectively. But the human is still involved. It's a partnership. The human is there to serve as a guardrail, if you will, with regards to making sure where there's perhaps some judgment. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
let's face it, there's always going to be a judgment call, uh, in conducting business. And so you need that human to be partnering with the machine, if you will, to provide that as well as empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and your example of what's going on today with regards to the hiring recruitment process or whatever, it's abysmal. You can't
Yeah.
go on to LinkedIn without just reading post after post
Yeah.
of people who are just so burnt out, disgruntled, um, just stressed out because they're spending this inordinate amount of time searching for a job, and they know what's happening on the other end.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
It's really
so
disheartening. And that's just
yeah,
one example of
yeah.
where I believe that it's carelessly used. And another example that came up in this morning's conversation when I was talking with the other person about the conversation they had, they also shared another story where there was a particular company that just had some wild, crazy, absolutely nuts freaking idea that they wanted to have 200 or so courses developed in 5 months. And they were mandatory. They were adamant that oh no no, we want everything to be done by AI. And they were very bullish about it. They weren't trying to hear any kind of reasoning, nothing. And they found somebody to do it, but it wasn't done well. That goes without saying. And that to me, that's an abuse. That's an abuse of AI. There no regard to if any actual learning was going to go on. Then no regard for the learners, no regard for anything. They were only focused on money. And that's a slippery slope. That's a dangerous place to be if you're going to me, I consider that to be a form of weaponizing AI. It's like, how
Mm,
incredibly stupid and hurtful can you get with this
mm,
tool in your hand to allow you to
mm,
do some of the craziest, dumbest stuff that you could possibly do with no regard to the outcomes? That being said, I wanted to add one other thing. If you use AI to free up time, okay, would that actually improve decision making or improve performance? In other words, what would people actually do with the time that's freed up? So we have to go beyond simply identifying places where AI can alleviate some pain points and free up some time. we need to leverage that and make sure that, don't just free up the time and then leave it at that. Free
Right.
up the time and make sure you make good use of that time freed up.
Sure.
And you
Yeah.
might remember me speaking previously about how I view it as a tool. If you have high performing people in place, you hired them for their expertise. You hire them to be really good at their core skills, but they get bogged down with, administrivia and minutia, and they're not necessarily being used to their highest potential because they have to do certain things repetitively, it's low, it's a low mental value of what they're doing. So in
Yeah.
that case, you could do well to be very deliberate and intentional about how you leverage the time that you save by
Yeah.
using AI. Make it not just a, hey, we're just going to like fill in the blank with this AI and we're going to, be more efficient or faster or whatever, but really take advantage of that to get the upper hand and really improve the quality of the work that people do and
Right.
enhance their employee experience while you're at it. Not
Yeah.
only is that going to be great for productivity, but it's going to be great for you as a company as well. Because as we also know, having discussed the service profit chain, one of my favorite things,
Mhm.
the better you are at creating great work environments for people, the more likely they are to be more engaged and more loyal, and that does increase morale and productivity. And then, of course, that leads to better outcomes for your customers, and then so on and so forth. Then, when they're happy and they're more loyal, you see how that goes all the way. So, but it
Rhonda,
starts,
Rhonda, I see it as a no-brainer. Everything that you just drilled down on, it only makes sense. It's a win-win for the
yeah,
organization, for the individual, for the business. My premise with the use of generative AI is that, again, it's a partnership between the employee who was performing the function and now is, has programmed AI to take it over or whatever. But then that allows that employee to have the opportunity to do things that typically most employees complain about, that they don't have enough time to spend on projects, research, anything to help make a process or a procedure or task even better than how it's performed today. And that's what AI will allow individuals to do now. And so, you know, like I said, it's a no brainer.
yeah, and again, to reiterate, it's not just about the tools. Opening this conversation talking about, oh, we want to use AI just because blah 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 blah. They're gung ho. They're more focused on the tools and the outcomes. So, AI readiness isn't about just the tools, just for the sake of tools.
No, as you stated, it's the why. Okay, well, why do you want
Yeah.
to use it? What are you
Well,
going to use it? How are you going to use it?
and
What
I
is it going to do for you?
And I believe that this is a useful exercise, not only just to identify AI use cases, but it's a useful exercise because, as you already mentioned, even before AI, not everybody was doing a great job of having this. What did you call it? Desk level audit? Is that what you called it?
Yeah, desk level audit.
Not everybody was doing a good job of even
No,
understanding what people do anyway. We know this
right.
because of the lack of cross training that we often see in companies. I don't know what they do over there. And then a crisis comes. Somebody goes out on for some some medical leave or something like that, and now all of a sudden they're scrambling because they haven't been intentional with making sure that there's at least a level of awareness across departments or across teams or whatever about what people do. So this is a useful exercise
Yeah,
in not
yeah.
only identifying the AI use cases, but raising an awareness of how work actually gets done on a daily basis. Because let me tell you one last thing, not last, but one other thing that reminds me. Oh, I I recall I had a client years ago. It's been a long, long time ago. And This was ridiculous. I couldn't believe this was a technology company, and the work that these people do is extremely important. Okay. I'm not going to
Mhm.
give you a lot more details. But do you know how flabbergasted I was when I learned that they documented absolutely nothing? So I was tasked with having to create some operations training. And so I'm going in and I'm meeting with subject matter experts and I'm sitting down and I'm interviewing them and I'm like, okay, well, do you have some SOPs or some manuals or some document, do you have something that I can familiarize myself with your processes so that I have a better understanding of what you do, so that I can connect dots and I can, have some synergy around
Mhm.
not only, just the particular topic that I'm writing training about, but just so I can understand how that interacts and engages with other roles and other tasks and things in the environment. And with just, it's good to have kind of a meta understanding of what
Mhm.
is going on.
Mhm. Yeah.
Oh, we don't have anything like that. I'm sorry, what? No,
Like,
we don't. I'm like, do you like not a Word, just a Word document? Cocktail napkin? Something? No, no. Harry, he's been working here 20 years, man. He just knows everything. I'm like, okay. And if Harry wins the lottery and runs away with a circus, then what? Well, I don't know. I was like, because that's very risky. You mean to
mm,
tell me that your operations, your critical functions are not documented anywhere?
mhm.
Absolutely nowhere.
Yeah.
And they just, because it was a mom and pop company to start off with, and they didn't have a lot of turnover because it was a great company. People loved working there, but we all age and retire. Okay, things happen. And it turns out that they did have an unusual bump in losing some folks for different reasons. Either
Yeah.
they retired or had to move out of state or something really drastic. Um, and I was like, this really puts you at great risk. You need to start documenting the
Yeah.
things that you do and the way that you do it. And so, that's where it's like, it's not good enough to just say, okay, we're going to use AI. We got it. Yep, we're doing this. You really have to have an understanding of what work is getting done. Because
Right.
how are you going to keep the AI in check if you don't have your own awareness about how things are
Mhm.
done? So,
Yeah.
and maybe AI can help you with creating those guardrails and those tools and resources. But, these are very important questions that only the humans can answer,
Yeah.
right? And
Absolutely.
so, we've
Absolutely.
got to put
Yeah.
those in place, and they have to drive the narrative and the conversation around establishing what these use cases are. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, you just you created a flashback in my mind with regards to organizations that typically, and particularly mom and pop type. I was working for a rather large telecommunications company, I guess back in the early '90s or so, and we had acquired a large regional telecom company. This was in Chicago, and I was tasked to be that particular. Once we brought them on board or whatever, I was asked to support that unit as the regional HR manager. And I recall when I first got there, my first week or two, I was just trying to sort out the processes and policies that they had in place, and it was a significant task because they didn't have any, and I was just like dumbfounded. I was like, how did you guys? How were you able to function? How were you able to operate? and you don't have the most basic HR policies and procedures in place. And so, and in spite of their success, they were able to, or I should say, in spite of their lack thereof, they were very successful. You know, they were generating a lot of income, a lot of revenue, and that's what made them attractive to this large company that I worked for at the time. So it happens. And you
You know,
think,
it happens more often than I think people realize, because you
mm-hmm,
just
that's where
reminded
I was going.
me
Yeah.
that I I've I've observed certain companies that went 20 years without having HR department.
Mm-hmm.
And all I can think of is, holy moly, man, talk about being lucky, because, there's a couple of them along the way that they had some weird and inappropriate things going on. And to be quite honest with you, they're lucky they didn't have a couple of lawsuits, if you
Yeah.
know what I mean.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So.
Harassment lawsuits, if you know what I mean. Just doing stupid stuff, just doing and saying really dumb, stupid things. And just, I'm like, dude, it's not, we're not living in the 70s. This isn't Mad Men. Like, you need to tone that down a bit, buddy, like, just
Mhm.
dumb stuff. I'll leave it at that. You know what I'm inferring, right?
Oh
You know
yeah.
what I'm talking
Been there,
about.
done that. Got the T-shirt, the sweater, the jacket, the overcoat.
Right, right. So we
Yeah.
talked about job task analysis, and how that's a really great place to start to identify AI use cases. Now I want to like zoom out a little bit and talk about how it doesn't end there, because
Hmm.
there's also an opportunity to assess your business processes. And we just talked about systems and business process mapping and whatnot in our last episode. So, how
Hmm.
relevant is that, right? So, here we are again. You're going to pull that up one more time. Um, you remember we remember, I think we talked last week, the last episode. The question was, when things go sideways, do you blame your people, or do you even actually look at your processes, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and it's interesting enough, because in the conversation yesterday, when I was speaking to the first colleague that I mentioned, he mentioned, he said it right out loud, and we were not talking about that. He just was talking about something else, and he just volunteered and just said it right out of his own mouth. I'm like, oh, dude, we were just talking about that in our last podcast. I invited him to go check that out. He said, yeah, they're really quick to blame people, but they
Hmm.
fail to look at their systems and their processes, or the
Hmm.
the the kind of things, the environment which people are forced to kind of work in. And they don't take a hard, honest look at their infrastructure on the inside. I mean, I happen to believe, unless you're just an absolute sociopath, that most people want to do good, and they
Hmm.
will do good. I believe that most people are conscientious. They're not trying to cheat their employers. They're not trying to just get by. Of course, there are some bozos out there that do that. They're grifters, and they just want to get a paycheck and they don't care. Well, if you're doing your job right as a leader, you will be able to weed them out, and you will act accordingly, because the glue that holds that together is a strong culture. And when you have accountability baked into your strong culture, you're just not going to tolerate that crap. Okay.
Right.
So with that being said, I I would rather look to the systems and the processes to see, okay, what has the potential of breaking down here, and that's where AI can really come in and help. Where are we getting bottlenecks happening? Where are things getting held up at? Are people bogged down and not able to make decisions quickly because they're too bogged down with other things that AI could relieve them of. We were talking about how people could have their time, get some of their time back. So, as part of getting some of their time back and how to make use of that time, well, then maybe they could spend more time tending to some of the sensitive areas um, within the business processes and the systems. And, we talk about this critical decision making. We can spend more time on that. We can spend more time on building relationships within the organization, coaching people, empowering people more, developing people more, inviting people to be more innovative and creative. There are so many things that you can do once you've been able to free up time.
All the things that most staff complain about, that they don't have enough time to do because they're so burdened down with the day in and day out administrivia. Um, Absolutely. And that's why, again, I go back, and I don't mean to sound cliche or whatever by making comments like it's a no brainer or whatever, but it really is. Um, this tool that we have now is just so massive. And by the way, you said something that made me think of this. If you point AI in the right direction and have it performing certain functions or whatever that would free you up or whatever, guess what's going to happen? This machine is so smart, and it's only getting smarter by the day. It'll even figure out how it's performing that task better. Come back and
Mm-hmm.
suggest to you, hey, you know what? This is AI talking. As I'm
Mm-hmm.
performing this, it's just let's tweak this and do it. I could do it even better than the way it's being performed or whatever. So that's why it's so critically important, as you pointed out, Rhonda, that you have to take the time out at the very beginning and make sure that you understand the processes and tasks that you have in place today, so that when you do turn it over, you give the machine the opportunity, if you will, to even perfect it even more.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback off of that as well because you make an excellent point that yes, it can learn, but again, with human oversight and
With
validation,
oversight,
right?
partnership,
Um,
absolutely.
but in terms of since we've moved on to talking about business process mapping, uh, specifically when it comes to areas where work gets handed off,
Hmm.
and it changes hands, it changes teams, it changes departments, whatever. It moves along a trajectory. um, you have your customer journey, you've got your work order journey, you've got your you've got a journey that work can go through, and it changes hands. So if you pay attention to the places along the work journey, the developmental journey or whatever, where
Hmm.
work changes hands, how many times does it happen? What kinds of changes are made? What kinds of decisions have to be made at that juncture? Who makes the decisions? Who's responsible for what? So, RACI charts and whatever of that nature. Um, who needs to be in charge of quality to make sure that that's done consistently well?
Yeah.
And here's where AI can really help. I mean, once you set it out to that, it can start to spot rework. How many
Hmm.
times do we have to do rework? How many times are there errors and flaws? Are we taking time to figure out what caused those errors and flaws? What
Hmm.
can we do to improve upon that? Do we need additional resources? Do we need to change the way this particular piece of the process is completed? So back to the earlier part of the conversation when I talked about pattern detection,
Hmm.
you know, that is going to play a big part here. If you take the time, once you've done your job task analysis, and then you're doing business process mapping and you're analyzing your business processes and you map it all out, you can even put a prompt in to say, okay, this is the current way that we're doing it, and then ask it, is there a better way that this can be done? or even say, I have a goal that I would like to reduce the time that it takes to do this by, 10%, 15, whatever, and see what it
Hmm.
says. See if it makes some
Yeah.
recommendation. There might be some tools out there that you're not even aware of that can help you speed that up or make it more consistently of quality. And so, you know, then you start to identify that, and then you put those tools into play. And then you might, because you might find, oh, well, maybe I can combine tasks.
Hmm.
Or maybe after I've done an audit, I realize that we have unneeded steps. We weren't very efficient when we designed this in the first place. And
Yeah.
maybe due to technology upgrades or streamlining, whatever, we didn't take the time to notice this because we've been so busy. But now that we're looking at it, we do realize, oh, we don't need that step anymore. We've evolved. And so that's not
Yeah.
necessary. So then you can start to rewrite some of these processes and procedures and remap things, combine tasks. And I also think that this done correctly, this forces you to look at things systemically. Favorite word. And from
This
a
is the first time you used that term in
pardon,
our podcast today.
what?
That was the first time that's the first time you used that term in today's
I know,
podcast.
right?
I've been waiting.
I think I
How
use
many
it.
minutes was it?
I know, right? But it's true because once you look at things
It is.
systemically and you can identify like, okay, well maybe if there's something that I could do differently earlier
Yeah.
in the process, we can eliminate this step later down the line because we've already matched it with another task that we complete earlier down the line, looking at it from a
Yeah.
different perspective. But as you know, a lot of times things get done in a silo and
Hmm.
departments don't talk to each other, and things are often completed in a rush. And so even though they may intend to come back and redo this more thoroughly, oh, I know we need to do this more thoroughly, but we're such in a rush. We only have time to do it this way right now. We'll come back to it. And then, sometimes that doesn't happen. Tomorrow never comes and you don't really get to come back to it. And then you're just kind of stuck. And the more often that you complete this process in that way, well, it just gets kind of burned into to the system. And that just becomes the way that things are done. So that's that's one piece. And anyway, before I move on to the next one, do you have any questions about that? Because I have
No.
two
No.
more pieces I
No.
want to cover. So
Let's
the
let's
next,
let's let's
so,
keep it going.
so the next piece is, as I was thinking about this last night. So we're doing all this analysis and we're talking about the way things should be done, et cetera, et cetera. Well, once we've determined that, we need to tighten up our KPIs. Because as these changes are implemented and the way of doing things changes, your KPIs need to be reflective of that.
Mm.
So you need to do an audit of your KPIs and make sure that they're tied to these job task inventories and the business process mapping and who's responsible for what, and
Mhm.
tighten that up. Because if there's ever anything that I've ever seen, and I just had another conversation. I've been coaching someone for the past couple of months, and I just coached somebody new this weekend who is having problems at work with a manager who is giving them, in their opinion, unfair performance reviews. And so my first question is, well, where's the evidence of that? And every time I ask someone, well, where are your KPIs? What's the performance criteria? Is it written out? Do you guys do this methodically? Did you agree to this? Do you know where you stand? What's the data say about how you're performing? And it's always so vague and muddy and not well established and not written down. And it's like people are giving others performance reviews based on a vibe. It's a
Mhm.
vibe. Like, oh God, I'm so tired of that. Like, why is everything done on a vibe? Let's have some clear, hard facts here, man. It just,
Rhonda, that really would have gotten on your nerves if you were an HR professional, an HR generalist like myself, coaching leaders, managers, year in, year out, documentation, all of that kind of stuff. By the
oh,
way, that
sure.
plays out this time of year every year. A lot of people are going through that right now as we speak.
Yeah. Well, so of
Yeah,
course that needs to be part of this exercise of
yeah.
going through the method that you use to identify AI use cases. And then once you've established that and you've tightened up your KPIs, and here's the reason why AI is useful for this, because once you've established that, use AI to detect deviation
Hmm.
from the KPIs. Okay, because as you know, a performance review is done in in after the fact.
Hmm.
Okay, so you have lagging indicators, and but if you have an AI protocol in place to detect a deviation from the performance
Hmm.
criteria, such
Hmm.
that if someone's doing some work and their work is being, you have a partner in AI and it's being checked. It's not
Hmm.
only good, just hear me out. I want to be really clear about this. Not to be used as a hammer over the head, not to be used as a tool to micromanage people, but to be used as a partner. If
Hmm.
I'm an employee and I have certain work that I have to do, and if I have an AI that I can use as a partner in my, whether I, document what I'm doing weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever. Okay. And there are performance criteria that are baked into this analysis partner. It would be helpful for me to know in advance, hey, you know what? You kind of missed something over here. Hey, you might want to take another look at this. Are you sure about that? Because I'm detecting that, something, something, something along these parameters wasn't necessarily met to 100%. Or it could even make recommendations. Maybe you might want to try to do it this way or something like that. That'd be great for the employee, because if you have an AI resource that can detect deviation from criteria, from performance criteria, wouldn't you want to know about it in advance instead of a year from now sitting in your
Yeah.
performance review and hearing that you didn't get such a great score, or whether it's, I don't know, it depends. On some companies do them quarterly, some do them biannually, but a lot of them only
Hmm.
do them annually, which I think is not often enough. But that's too late. And that's
Yeah.
not only
Yeah.
not good for the employee, that's not good for the company either, because, well, you're going to wait until you find out at the end of the quarter that something didn't go very well. Can we have can we have an environment of continuous improvement? Can we use AI to keep our own selves in check and take the approach that we are interested in doing our best, and we are not going to take it personally if we slip up sometimes, because we are human, but we have this partner, this tool to help us do
Hmm.
better and be better in real time, not after the fact. I think that's a very huge opportunity to leverage AI to increase productivity and quality assurance,
Hmm.
by building
Yeah.
that in the right way. What say you about
Yeah.
that?
Oh, I'm all for it. In fact, I referenced an example of the partnership being the employee keeping the system in check or whatever, but you've just demonstrated the opposite end of that spectrum, whereby the system can serve as a guide, you know, rail if you will, guardrail
Guardrail.
rather,
Hmm.
to especially when it comes to measuring performance where there's metrics involved or whatever. The system can constantly keep a thumb on trends, the numbers on a quarterly basis or whatever, particularly if an individual is in something like sales or whatever, or some other function where, you know, metrics are heavily involved or whatever. Absolutely, the tool could do that. Again, another example of partnership, and it goes both ways. Goes both
Well,
ways.
and here's a good example. Wouldn't it be cool if you had AI that could detect how a conversation goes with a customer? And instead of waiting until you get your monthly CSAT scores to figure out, oh, well, we kind of we're in a trash can on that this month. We didn't. Okay, maybe every week or every other day or whatever. Or if there's something that happened, because I'm gonna go all the way back to my Earthlink days, and I don't know how
Ooh,
they
that's
did it.
going back.
Yeah,
That's going back.
I don't know how they.
Earthlink?
Yeah, but wait until I tell you what I overheard in a conversation one day.
Right.
This guy was talking about a new technology that they would build into their IVR that could detect anger. And I'm like,
Really?
that's crazy. How are they doing that? I don't know how they did it, but they could detect, like, if someone called up and the customer was like angry, maybe it was decibels. I don't know. They're yelling at the phone or whatever. Okay. But
Yeah.
keywords, decibels, I don't know how it would work. But if
Hmm.
they had a way to detect anger back in 2007, think of what
Mm.
they can do now with AI. So in
Yeah.
this case, where you're talking about metrics based performance,
Hmm.
what if phone calls were monitored, which they often are, and maybe this is probably already going on. But I'm talking about using it in a specific, deliberate way. Because when you call up and you're waiting on hold, it's like this call may be monitored for training purposes and da, 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 da. And well,
Hmm.
okay, well, do they really actually do anything with that? I don't know. But if you had a system built in place where your calls were monitored, and because I used to work in a call center way back in the day, and there was someone that would monitor your call every night. It was a person monitoring your call, and they'd come and they'd give you immediate feedback. Okay, but now if AI can do that, and you can get real feedback in the moment, and that can trigger conversations sooner than later, and then it can trigger, maybe you can identify early, by detecting early, if someone needs to be coached on how they talk to people,
Yeah.
or how they
Yeah.
resolve conflict, or how they anything, fill in the blank. That
Yeah.
is that that detection of deviance from the performance criteria is really
Hmm.
critical, and I think that's where I think that's a very, very high value of anything that we've discussed so far. Of course, job
Yeah.
task being absolute
So,
foundational. This is a
yeah.
piece that's like really, really huge.
Yeah. So, Rhonda, I was just going to weigh in, and it's not a news flash for you, but it might be a news flash to a lot of people today. That's an example of where AI is being leveraged to some varying degree. I have a number of examples, and maybe I could share those before we sign off on today's podcast or whatever. But in this particular area that you exampled, as far as you know, customer call center, customer service, that kind of thing, AI is already doing things like drafting responses to routine common inquiries
Oh yeah.
that it listens to, creating knowledge-based articles based on customer feedback, summarizing tickets that get submitted or whatever. And you just added again in that same space where for customer service, call center type activity or whatever, AI can play a significant part as far as performance improvement.
Yeah.
By providing data, information that could be utilized by the person, that customer service agent or whatever, where they could find out in real time almost, how they're performing and what they need to tweak in terms of their performance, so that
Mhm.
at the end of the year, when they sit down and have that, you know, dread, awful conversation. I say that because most people don't like to have that conversation, but they could go into it confidently because they know throughout the year they've been able to improve on some things that their partner AI pointed out to them.
Mhm. Now let me add another layer to it, because the next layer, because that's you really said that beautifully, and that segues really very nicely into the next layer, which is gathering this information from, detecting, you know, uh, deviation from performance criteria, and summarizing, basically how things are going. The next thing is that would then be critical information to have that will inform your periodic key results.
Mm. Hmm.
Because, you have to be able to pivot and have a real true understanding of, well, what do our key results need to be for this quarter?
Hmm.
Well, based on what we're hearing and seeing, because we've pulled a lot of information from all of our resources, maybe we have a customer service problem, maybe we have a quality problem, maybe we've got, you know, something's going on, and you could even, I mean, the options are so they're just limitless, right?
They are. They are.
So
On
whatever,
that note too, I just wanted to add that on that note, very specifically in that specific space, as far as data gathering, information, that kind of thing. Man, AI is all over it. I mean,
yeah,
it's just constantly, if it's again pointed in the right direction, you've asked it to do the right thing, okay? Um, to gather the right information for you, to monitor the right information or whatever. It's just a plethora of stuff. Um, you know, just so many examples. I'm kind of getting excited because a lot of what we're talking about, I've recently read, have researched or whatever, and there's just so many opportunities to use this tool
yeah.
to everyone's benefit.
Well, to kind of start to summarize things too, because today's talk is about an approach for
Yeah, yeah,
identifying legitimate opportunities to use AI. So that's what this whole conversation has been. It's not about AI itself. I'm not here to train people on AI. There's so many people out there doing that already. We've had other conversations about the ETAC framework for adopting AI within an organization, with the understanding that that's an organization that has already established their use cases. So then they move on to adopting it, how to help their people get on board with it. Today's conversation, I'm so glad we had it, because it's a little bit different, because it's like, okay, well, how do you go about even knowing that AI is right for you? How should you go about using it? And in what cases and to what degree? Of course, with human oversight as an automatic.
yeah.
The other thing I want to add to that, no matter what approach you take, obviously, I just laid out some ideas that I just popped up last night, using, aspects of my work in performance consulting and learning and development and change management. So I already had a pretty good starting point to, come up with some ideas about how to use the skills that I already have to put the AI lens on it. Like, well, how can we
Hmm.
use AI? Okay, so that's cool. The one thing I really want to stress that's super, super important is, don't automatically approach this like, hey man, this is a rollout. Approach this with a sense of curiosity and an open mind, and create an experiment first. You want to
Hmm.
experiment with this approach. You want to experiment with figuring out what the use cases are. Try them out, get some feedback, see how it works. I highly doubt that it's going to be a one and done kind of thing where, oh, yep, we're going to do it for there. We're going to use it like that and move on. If you want to make sure to be true to your word and instill trust with people and get them to understand that you really mean what you say, that you are not here to replace them, you are here to use this as a tool, then you want to take that experimental approach and keep an open mind with curiosity and be very, very clear at all times about why you're doing this, okay? Because, the most important thing is to assuage a lot of the fear around AI. It's going to take my job and things of that. Those are legitimate concerns that everybody has. I mean, we've already talked about how AI is being misused in cases right now, with the job recruiting piece, right? So, taking that kind of approach and keeping an open mind is going to help to protect the human side of adopting AI. And then, that's where my whole impetus starts with why I created the program that I'm developing right now, because it's the human side, the human approach, the human based approach to it. I
Yeah.
don't see this. I'm going to be very honest with you. When all of this started to come into fore a couple years ago, whatever, I was really uncomfortable about it. I wouldn't say I was fearful. I was just like, I don't know about all that. I was a little slow. I wasn't the first one to jump on and, you know, check it out. But
Yeah.
I'm also a realist and I understood it's like, well, you can't just bury your head in the sand. You got to check it out. And then I started to look into it. And then, but I also absorbed a lot of the fear that people were expressing around it. And I still hear that now. And of course, we don't know what's going to happen. I myself am not in favor of the decision to not regulate it to some degree. I think that's dangerous and irresponsible, but that's a topic for another day. But back on track with talking about sustaining trust and getting people to calm down about it. As a leader, please, 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 I implore you, don't take this hatchet approach. If you're thinking already with your mind, oh, how many jobs can I eliminate? Please don't be that person. Please instead think of a way of how can I expand and really leverage what I already have. How can I get more out of the workforce that I have um, without it costing me a whole lot more? Now, realistically, and because this also came up in the conversation yesterday, there are going to be jobs that will be eliminated.
Mhm.
I would be lying if I said that, oh, that's never going to happen. But I also want to say that it could be, I look at it this way, or those jobs that needed to be eliminated that would have been eliminated anyway if we were being as efficient and proficient and paying attention as we could be. Because, like you
Sure.
said, there are companies that are very successful and they make a lot of money despite their inefficiencies. And I know I've talked about that a few times. But if you really start to like take a look under the hood, and if you discover that maybe you do have too many layers of management. Okay, well, I would hope that you would first see how you can repurpose those roles instead of letting people
Sure.
go.
Redeploy.
But sometimes it's inevitable, okay?
Yeah. Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
for
Yeah. It's
anybody
going to happen
who's
organically.
yeah,
Yeah.
but anybody who's out there listening who might find themselves being potentially that person that might get eliminated, I would say educate yourself about AI and become an AI practitioner and really learn how to leverage. In other words, don't bury your head in the sand, okay?
Right. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's not that AI is going to solve your problems, but it might reveal some things that hadn't been looked at closely. It might
Mhm.
reveal some cracks. And if you
Yeah.
start tending to the cracks, things start to get shaken up. And of course, that's change. And, more often than not, it's not often immediately embraced with open arms and a big smile, as we know.
Mhm.
So I would just say, just be very mindful about the approach as you go
Right.
through this method of, again, identifying AI use cases in your business. Be very clear about why you're doing it and your intention, and always work towards instilling trust and be honest with people. Don't be,
There you go.
and be
There's ethics
transparent.
involved in this.
Yes.
Absolutely.
By
Yeah.
George, at the end of the day, be ethical.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not too much to ask. And the
Right.
final layer of my little method that I was thinking of yesterday. So we just talked about how the outcomes can inform our key results. And like I always say, whether it's a training initiative or a change initiative or anything, always be cognizant of what your major strategic business objectives are and tie back all of your efforts to that. And that's it, Kevin. We got through it
Yeah.
in, I mean, we ran a little bit long today, but we covered a lot. And so, do you have anything you want to add to best practices
Hey,
for
the,
identifying AI use
you,
cases?
you've said it all, but I'm going to put a bow around the present that you wrapped for us today. By the way, great session, great content. Um, I agree with you wholeheartedly that the approach should be focusing on the work itself, the task, understanding what those tasks are, how they're performed today, and how you might want to approach utilizing our friend AI to perform those tasks. And just overall, everything I've read suggests, Rhonda, that you start out small,
Yeah,
you measure the impact,
right.
and then based on what you measure, you scale it to that so that you can keep the success going. I think if you employ that approach or whatever, you're off to a successful start of utilizing AI in your workplace.
And let me add the cherry on top. Document, 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 document.
Without a doubt.
Please, people,
Without a
write it
doubt.
down. Write it down and build your SOPs along the way, and document the journey, and even the various iterations that you will go through as you experiment and do the trial runs,
Yeah.
because that history is going to be very useful for other people to come after you, so that you have an archive of how did we go about this, and even document not only your findings, but document the process of going through this. I would say
Mhm.
document the journey of establishing AI use cases. Document how you went about doing needs analysis. Document, I'm just a big, you know, advocate of that, because I am of the belief that you should have things in such a way that if someone came behind you, because I always like to use the win the lottery and run away with the circus idea, or whatever, or move to a private island or something. Um, People who come behind you should be able to pick up where you left off without a whole bunch of confusion, and the instructions should be clear so that there's no question about what there is to do and how to do it and what success looks like.
Yeah.
Period. That's my little final say. So, thank you everyone for listening today. If you want to reach out to us, we can be reached at www.whitewolfinc.com. If you appreciated this content today, please do give this video a like, comment, let us know what you would like for us to cover the next time or at some time in the future. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our channel and share this with someone who might be of interest with what we talked about today. And thank you so much, and we will see you the next time.
Take care, everyone. Thank you,
All right.
Rhonda.